The tray slid through the slot in the steel door. At first glance, it looked like something from a dumpster. A lump of gray porridge, a slice of stale bread, and a piece of meat so thin it was nearly see-through. This was breakfast in one of the poorest prisons in the world. The inmate who picked it up didn't even chew. He swallowed quickly, because if he didn't eat now, someone stronger might take it. But thousands of miles away, in a prison in a rich country, the scene looked completely different. A tray arrived with fresh fruit, vegetables, even a small carton of milk. Some inmates there complained it wasn't enough seasoning. Others refused to eat because they didn't like the taste. Meanwhile, prisoners in poor countries were fighting rats just to guard their plates. The shocking part? Both prisons held criminals who had committed similar crimes, yet their punishments were worlds apart when it came to food. In some places, food became a weapon of survival. In others, it was a right that even prisoners could count on. One inmate in a poor country prison once whispered to a reporter, "This food is not for humans, it's for animals." And another guard admitted off camera, "We don't serve meals, we serve control." But across the ocean, in the wealthy systems, prisoners complained not about hunger, but about boredom, saying the food felt like a never-ending school cafeteria menu. The question is, how did prison food become such a clear mirror of rich versus poor countries? And what shocking truths hide behind the steel doors of both? To understand how it all began, we need to go back to where prison food became more than just a meal, but a fight for life. And just when one inmate thought things couldn't get worse, an extreme moment hit. The kitchen ran out of supplies, and the guards brought in something no one had ever expected to see on a prison tray.
The trays came out late that day, and when the covers were lifted, silence fell across the block. Instead of rice or beans, the plates carried a strange mixture of boiled animal parts, bones, skin, and fat scraps that looked more like trash than food. Some inmates gagged. Others laughed bitterly, saying, "We're eating what the dogs wouldn't touch." That night, fights broke out in the cells. The strongest inmates cornered the weak and demanded their portions. For some, those scraps meant the difference between making it through the night or collapsing from hunger. In that prison, food wasn't just survival, it was power. Whoever controlled the trays controlled the block. Meanwhile, in a rich country prison, the same evening meal looked completely different. There, prisoners were served pasta with sauce, bread, and a small dessert. Some even had a choice between vegetarian or meat options. Guards didn't have to worry about food riots. Inmates argued about TV channels, not about whose turn it was to eat. The contrast was painful. In poor countries, food could cause bloodshed. In wealthy ones, it was routine, boring but guaranteed. Yet beneath the surface, even in the rich prisons, the food system held secrets. Contractors made millions supplying prisons with cheap, low-quality ingredients. Inmates might not be starving, but many complained about constant stomach problems, saying the meals felt like processed cardboard. Back in the poor prison, things escalated further. The day after the scraps were served, an inmate collapsed in the yard. His body was weak from weeks of malnutrition. Others whispered that the next delivery might be worse, that the prison was running out of food entirely. And then, the unthinkable happened. A riot broke out in the kitchen, where desperate inmates tried to seize control of the food storage. Guards rushed in, batons swinging, alarms blaring. The riot in the kitchen spread like wildfire. Prisoners grabbed whatever they could, pots, ladles, even burning wood from the stove. For them, it wasn't just about food anymore. It was about survival and dignity. The guards stormed in with shields, shouting commands. But the smell of smoke and the roar of angry inmates drowned everything out. Some prisoners smashed open the food storage room, only to find shelves nearly empty. A few bags of rice, some rotten vegetables, and cans so rusted they were barely usable. The truth hit them hard. There was no secret stockpile, no hidden supply. The prison really was starving them. Meanwhile, in a prison thousands of miles away, Breakfast the next morning included scrambled eggs, toast, and juice. Inmates lined up calmly, trays in hand, chatting about sports and family visits. They didn't know that in poorer prisons, men were fighting over spoiled scraps. They didn't know that some were collapsing from hunger, or that guards were using food as punishment. But even in rich countries, not all was well. Some inmates whispered about the deals between prisons and food contractors, companies cutting corners to save money, serving cheap processed meals while pocketing massive profits. The food might look better than in poor prisons, but in reality, many prisoners called it junk fuel, leaving them sick, overweight, or constantly tired. Back in the smoke-filled kitchen of the poor prison, the chaos reached its peak. One prisoner, desperate and furious, climbed onto the counter and shouted, "We will not eat like dogs anymore." His voice echoed across the block. For a brief moment, the rioters believed they could take control. But then came the retaliation. Guards locked down the prison, cutting off water, electricity, and access to what little food was left. Days turned into nights with no meals at all. Prisoners sat in darkness. SE. When the guards finally unlocked the cells, the prisoners rushed to the slot, expecting another tray of scraps or nothing at all. But this time, the food wasn't cooked inside the prison. It came from outside, donated by a local charity that had struck a deal with the warden. The trays held rice, beans, and even small pieces of chicken. To the starving inmates, it looked like a feast. Some cried as they ate, clutching the food with shaking hands, afraid someone might take it away. But this gift wasn't kindness. It was strategy. The warden allowed the charity meal only after days of near starvation, knowing it would calm the chaos. For a short while, the prison returned to order. Guards bragged that one good meal could quiet hundreds of desperate men. Across the ocean, in a rich country prison, a very different controversy brewed. Reports surfaced that private contractors were overcharging taxpayers for prison meals while delivering cheap frozen food. The plates still looked decent compared to poor countries, but behind the scenes, corruption was eating away at the system. Some meals were so processed, they barely resembled real food. Prisoners complained about stomach pain, rotten milk cartons, and expired bread. Yet on paper, the costs looked higher than fresh restaurant meals. Back in the poor prison, the temporary relief didn't last. Within a week, the charity food ran out. The prison returned to watery porridge and scraps. Inmates began trading anything they had, cigarettes, soap, even clothing, just to get an extra spoonful from someone else's tray. Hunger turned men into predators, watching each other's bites, waiting for weakness. One night, it went too far. A prisoner attacked his cellmate over a piece of bread hidden under a mattress. By morning, one of them was dead. The guards carried the body away without a word, leaving the surviving inmate starry. The killing over bread sent shockwaves through the prison. Word spread faster than the guards could contain it. By morning, every block was buzzing with whispers. "He killed him for food. Imagine what happens when there's none left." Fear filled the air, but so did rage. The guards responded with brutal lockdowns. Doors slammed, lights went out, and the prisoners were trapped in silence. No one knew when the next meal would come, or what it would even be. Some men banged on their doors demanding answers. Others lay quietly, saving what little strength they had left. Meanwhile, in a wealthy country prison, the same morning looked ordinary. Prisoners stood in line for trays of oatmeal, fruit, and milk. Some pushed the trays back, saying they weren't hungry. Others poured the milk into the trash because it wasn't cold enough. Guards sighed, annoyed at the complaints, but no one was starving. No one was killing for a crust of bread. The contrast couldn't be more brutal. In poor countries, food was a matter of life and death. In rich countries, it was a matter of taste. But the killing in the poor prison didn't just terrify the inmates. It embarrassed the administration. Reports leaked to the outside world, exposing the starvation and violence inside. The warden faced pressure from the government to restore control, not out of pity for the prisoners, but to protect the prison's reputation. That week, the guards introduced a new system. They began rationing food block by block, making prisoners line up under heavy watch to collect their trays. Anyone who caused trouble got nothing. Food became a tool of control, a way to punish the disobedient and reward the submissive. For a short time, it worked. Prisoners were too afraid to riot, too weak to resist. But then, one afternoon, something happened that pushed the entire prison to the breaking point. A truck arrived from